Everybody.
Hello.
Oh, and shalom.
Hello, I'm happy to see some familiar faces and some new faces of some of you who I have yet to meet. Did you all receive the email with the page I sent?
Yes.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Okay. So let's begin. My name is Rabbi Mordechai Zeller. I live in Israel in a kibbutz called Ma'ale Gilboa, which is up north, kind of halfway between Sfat and Jerusalem. And I'm a rabbi and I'm a clinical psychologist. And I work in the Gilboa region, and my clinic is right behind us here in the bottom of my home. And I work with the Jewish and Arab populations of the Gilboa. And I've been a rabbi for many years as well. I spent 3 years being the rabbi in Cambridge University. And I had a privilege of sitting in the old libraries and looking through some of the beautiful manuscripts there. I studied in a bunch of yeshivas. I grew up in a home where my Abba, Rabbi David Zeller, he loved books, and our home was always filled with books. And he would always say, "You're always safer with a sefer." A sefer in Hebrew means a book. And sometimes when we'd be young and he'd walk back from shul and he'd be carrying all these books and he'd ask us to carry them, and we would kind of make a face and he'd say, "You think you're carrying my books, but the truth is that my books are carrying you." So I grew up with the love of books, and I have many all around me. And we'll be delving into some of them and learning some text together. And I gotta say that the joy at opening up books and preparing a class is one of the parts I love most about this. So I'm happy to be back at AJS, at Applied Jewish Spirituality. And the last course I gave was, I would say, a year and a half ago, right before the war started. And it's been a crazy year and a half for, I would say, everybody, for the Jewish people, for the Israelis, for the Arab Israelis, for the Palestinians. It's been a really difficult year and a half. And specifically today's been a hard day in Israel. I don't know where you're from, if you're following the news, but it's been a bit of a difficult day for us here in Israel. And I'm starting with that just maybe to make a bit of a focus as we'll start our learning. Because so much of what we're going to be learning today is about words and about moments in our life that we don't have words. And I know it sounds strange to start learning about Passover when we haven't even gotten through Purim. Okay, because usually each holiday as it comes, that's the holiday that we need to be dealing with. There's a Hasidic story about Reb Moshe of Kobrin, who was a Hasidic master, and after he died, the students asked them, what was your Rebbe's thing? Like, what was his thing that he was known for? And his Hasidim thought for a while. You know, there was the Rebbe whose thing was building a sukkah, and another one keeping the Sabbath. And they thought for a while, and they said, our Rebbe's thing was whatever he was doing at that moment. So whatever holiday we're at, that can become a really intense and beautiful holiday. And I know teachings that say that every year, wherever we're getting to and dealing with, that holiday is what our, not just the time around us is focused at that, but something with the inner time and the outer time are in sync. So there's a teaching that says that 30 days before Passover, we start asking and learning to prepare for Passover, because Passover, it's one of the big holidays. It's a big holiday. Everybody knows what keeping a Seder is. You know, I think in the White House, there's traditionally a Seder, even if people who aren't Jewish celebrate freedom, gather together, and take part in this ancient tradition. So we're not a month before, we're a month and a half before. And I think that there's also a deep connection between Passover and between Purim, which is in 2 weeks, the holiday of chaos, the holiday of getting dressed up and getting drunk. And maybe that's the reason I called this course From Chaos to Seder. Seder, of course, means Seder, which is sitting around the table, all of our generations, as many as we can, and sometimes sitting alone and reading from the Seder, this ancient text. But Seder in Hebrew means order. So I called this course From Chaos to Order, because we're going to do a little bit of both. And we'll delve into some of the chaos and learn about that movement between chaos and order, which is such an important movement, not just at this time of year, and not just when things are so difficult and painful around us in Israel and all over the world, but also right here, right now, moving between chaos to order. So I just want to say another personal note about the tradition that I grew up in. So I'm a clinical psychologist and I'm in Jungian training. But to me, this was part of the family I grew up in because my grandfather, his name was Max, and he was born in Germany, but he was a student of Carl Jung. And my father would always tell that as a kid, they would have a Seder. They weren't Orthodox. They weren't an Orthodox home. They didn't clean, in some Orthodox home, they'll clean the whole house for what's called chametz, unleavened bread. And he says, we didn't do that. But we would sit together, all these old Jungians around a table, and speak about what it means to be free from the clutches of the ego. How can we let the self, that part of our soul, of our psyche, be free? And my father remembers these early memories of Passover are of these Jungian Seders that he used to have. And years later, when he became a Baal Tshuva, returnee to Judaism, and he met Reb Zalman Schachter and Reb Shlomo Carlebach and the whole crew there, so suddenly some of the teachings in the mystical and Hasidic tradition, he says, oh, but this is what my family did. It's not just about a historic event that happened many years ago. It's about a mythical event which is happening every day, which is happening every year, which is happening right now. And what I hope is to move between some of these teachings, the psychoanalytic teachings, and the Hasidic mystical ones. We'll learn parts from the Zohar and from some of the early Hasidic masters and stories of the Baal Shem Tov, and we'll kind of swim between some of these teachings. And all of them I will bring, they're on the page, in the original Hebrew or Aramaic that they were written. And sometimes I translate them myself. And sometimes I find the translation, I say, this isn't a good translation, so I try doing a better job, and we will learn them together. Okay? But my hope is that at the end of this course, of these 6 weeks that we'll be studying together, that wherever you are, that Passover, it's always a magnificent and special time, but that some of our learning will enable it to be maybe a bit of our spiritual work, a little bit even deeper. Okay, so let's start studying. And I'll say, I sent the email out. The way it works in AJS and Applied Jewish Spirituality, the first course is open to everyone. If there are people who are here to check it out and see if this is something you want to do, then welcome. But I do hope that the learning is good, is meaningful, and that you'll choose to join us for the rest of the course. And if anybody has anything to say or to add or to ask, I know at the end we'll be doing a little bit more of possibly a writing exercise. But please feel free to intervene, to say something, to share if there's something you have to say. Did that appear on everybody's screen? Good.
It's there, but could it be a little bit larger, please?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. So we're going to be talking a little bit about an opening to the Seder and about the story of the Jewish people and a little bit about trauma and healing. So the first teaching I'm bringing is from Rabbi Chaim Vital. Rabbi Chaim Vital. Vital literally means life, and so does Chaim. So his name is literally life. And he was the greatest student of Rabbi Isaac Luria, who lived in the 16th century in the city of Tzfat. He was the greatest student of the Ari, and Lurianic Kabbalah, that will kind of get tastes of it through this whole course, is based very much on the teachings of the Ari, Rabbi Isaac Luria, as recorded and written mainly by this one student. Rabbi Chaim Vital is buried in Damascus, and but he says that from the minute he met his teacher, he says, Lo masha yadi mitoch yado, my hand never left his. He spent as much time as he could. He understood. There's moments that you understand, that your soul locks in with your teacher. And he didn't have that long with him. It's interesting because we have a lot of his dreams. If you were with me on my dream course, we did a lot of Reb Chaim Vital's dreams, because he wrote his dream journal that his grandson, years later, published. I don't think he meant for it to be published, but we have access to his dreams. And a lot of his dreams, his master would come even after his death and keep on teaching him. And this is one of the most important things, and we're not going to delve in. This isn't a course on Lurianic Kabbalah, but one of the things that the Kabbalistic teachings teaches us is that everything that appears above appears below. And everything that appears in a story that happened many years ago happens also in a mythical sense in each person. And each person's soul is connected to the whole world. There's a teaching that says each person is a small world and the world is a great person. And I'll even say the word Kabbalah, which we're usually taught that it means to receive, lekabel. But Kabbalah can also come from the Hebrew word hakbalah. Hakbalah means parallel. Two lines that are parallel are kavim makbilim. And this is a whole other way of looking. To be a Kabbalist means that you see parallels in your life. You sit and say, the inner is like the outer. Oh, each person's soul is like a letter in the Torah, and each person is like the whole Torah. And the sky is like that which is below. I'm finding patterns, and to see that the inner work that I do is connected to that which is around us. So one of the teachings that we're going to start with is this, Liot ki shiv'im panim laTorah. Since the Torah has 70 different faces, 70 different ways to learn it, to understand it, to read it, ve'echad mehem hu remez. We know that there's pardes. The word paradise comes from pardes, which means orchard, but it hints to pshat, remez, drash, and sod, which is different 4 ways that we can learn text. The pshat is the simplistic level, what it says. The remez, it's what's hidden. You know, a Hebrew word for a stoplight, like if it's green or red, or a traffic light, is a ramzor, because it kind of winks at you. It hints to you what you need to do without actually saying it. Then there's drash, which is like midrash, which is what's not written. And the deepest level is sod, which is the secrets. And here he says, the Torah has 70 different faces, and one of which is remez. So the descent of Israel into Egypt, he's not talking about the book of Exodus here. He's talking about Israel, meaning Jacob, and all of his sons, and all of his grandsons, and all of his sons, daughters, and grandchildren. There were 66 of them who came down into Egypt, because together with Joseph and his 2 sons and Osnat, there were 70. But as he comes down, we're talking about a historic event. And Rabbi Isaac Luria says this isn't just a historic event, okay? The descent of Israel into Egypt in the end of the book of Genesis is likened to the fetus while in his mother's womb. Between the tight constraints, being in Egypt is like a pregnancy, because the word for Egypt in Hebrew is Mitzrayim, and Mitzrayim means, a matzor means to be under siege, to be in a constraint, to be in a tight place. So he says, all of the 210, the years that the people of Israel spent in Egypt was like a pregnancy. And Exodus, Yetziat Mitzrayim, is likened to childbirth. One of the moments of that is the splitting of the sea, which is like the breaking of the water, and becoming free is like being born. But here we have it. The opening to our journey is saying what we're learning about isn't just learning about a historic event that happened to Jewish people many years ago. We are learning about something that happens to each and every one of us, because each and every one of us was born. Each and every one of us had that experience of growing and the tight womb we were in. There was no room to contain us, and we had to be born, and it was tight and it was hard, and it wasn't easy to be born. There are all kinds of theories that even Freud speaks about, that the prenatal experiences, even though they're nonverbal, but our body remembers them. And so much of our earliest trauma have to do with this moment of being born. Okay. And the next thing I want to bring is from the Zohar. And forgive me if I give a little bit of overview, and I'm sure a lot of you know this. The Zohar, the book of splendor, my favorite book of Jewish mysticism.
Your keys.
It's not a book, it's...
Let me put this in your car, for glove box.
I don't think there's room.
Oh,
You can put it in the
Just
back.
let me see if I can mute
Driver's
it.
side or passenger, probably driver's side, right? Okay. Okay, I'll be back in 2 minutes.
So much.
1 second. Okay, if I could ask everybody to mute, that would be fine. And I'll do it in the settings that the muting will be automatic from now on. So the Zohar, the Book of Splendor, which was written probably by Moshe de Leon, 13th century Spain. I keep on saying we have to have a whole course just on the Zohar. The traditional view is the Zohar is written by Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who's buried in the mountain of Meron in the year 200 in the 2nd century, in the time of the Romans. But either way, it's an ancient text and a mystical text. And here's what he teaches about Jacob and his sons going down into Egypt. Viraza. What does Raza mean? Raza means a secret, but it means a mystery. My second son's name is Raz, because Raz is the greatest mystery. And here he's saying the Zohar is giving over a mystery. And Jacob saw that there was sustenance in Egypt. What's the word in Hebrew for sustenance? And I'm at source number 2.
Shever.
Shever. Shever means grain. It means food. But what else does shever mean?
Broken.
Brokenness. So this is what the Zohar says. And Jacob saw that there was sustenance in Egypt. And he said to his sons, why would you fear? Come and see. Why would you fear? Go down to Egypt. Get us food. And the Zohar says, come and see, because the Zohar is visual. It's filled with imagery. It always says, tachaze. The Talmud says, tashma, come in here. But the Zohar, it takes you on a journey that you have to imagine, and you have to see it in your eyes. Come and see. Prophecy is only given to those who have a broken heart. In Aramaic, tvire liba, those who have a broken heart. As it is written, go down and prepare rations, shivru, for us there, that we may live and not die. And what the Zohar is saying here is that people went for sustenance, but people also went because there was brokenness. What drew us to Egypt in the first place? There's something broken. There's a brokenness in Egypt that draws us to it. We have something within us that, yes, we're always drawn to healing, but we're also drawn to brokenness, to cracks. It's like standing at the edge of the cliff and we find ourselves drawn and fearful of it at the same time. And the Zohar says, know that we went to Egypt because we were drawn there.
Yeah.
What? And we were drawn to Egypt because we're drawn to brokenness. Our soul is drawn to that which is broken. Something within us reacts to it, meets it, and something happens to us there. Second.
Yeah.
Okay, 1 second more.
Yeah, let's start.
How can I do this? A caption.
And then.
If you open the participant screen, you can click on mute all.
you can take my- Oh. Nope.
Okay, 1 second. Mute all.
It's a button at the very bottom.
At the very bottom, I have more. I have show captions.
Wait, wipe it down. Yeah, wipe it down. Okay, hi.
Nice, I like your bag, it looks like mine.
Oh.
People, please check they're not muted. People aren't muted.
Your name again?
Owen.
Owen, thanks.
I'm one of the nurses.
Okay, I know. Are you gonna
Oh,
be
it's
staying on? when we-
Jocelyn.
Here we go. I found it.
Jocelyn,
Oh, yeah.
mute yourself.
Yeah.
Here we go. I got it.
So
Okay, is this better? Here we go. Okay, let's go back. Okay, everybody. Just now I don't see any. Okay, here we go. Okay, I'm really sorry for this. Okay, let's get back on stage. Okay, and let's do this. Here we go. Okay, so let's learn a little bit of some of the teachings about Egypt and about what happened to the people of Israel in Egypt. You can't see anybody here. Here, now I see you. Okay. Let's just try this one more time. I'm really, really sorry. Hang on. Okay. So now we're going to go to some of the earliest texts in the Bible, and we'll learn a little bit of that. So it says that the Egyptians ruthlessly imposed upon the Israelites the various labors. This is like the story of slavery that they made them perform. Ruthlessly, they made life bitter for them with harsh labor, mortar and bricks, and with all sort of tasks in the field. And the Israelites, and I want to read this part in Hebrew, okay? I'm skipping a little bit. There was hard work, and the hard work made them, this is how they reacted to this. Vayanchu bnei Israel min ha'avodah. Vayanchu, I guess it says here they were groaning, but it's like a sigh. They sighed from the hard work. Vayiz'aku, and they called out, they cried out. Vataz shavatam, and their cry for help rose up to God. Vayishma Elohim et na'akatam, and God heard their moaning. And God remembered the covenant with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. And God saw the Israelites, and God knew. What is this about? Did you see how many words there are to describe what? What is the situation that the people of Israel are saying when they say that they cried out and they sighed and they moaned, all these sounds that people are making, but they're not speaking? What are they doing? They're crying out. But the text here, and this is the oldest text we have, this is from the Bible. The Bible here, the Torah is telling us that all these words that are describing one thing, that they had no words. So, vayanchu, they sighed, vaizaku, and they cried out, shavatam. All these words are different words that describe the same thing. It's funny to have words to describe not having words. And it's not one, there's like 4 or 5 of them. And God hears that call, that cry. It's reminding me a little bit about the shofar that we learned about, that call that has no word, which is coming from the deepest place inside of us. But the people of Israel, they're crying out because they're enslaved, because it's hard, and they don't have words. They don't have words. And the next thing I want to bring, and this is in number 4, is a similar text, which is the story of Moses, Moshe Rabbeinu, who's the leader. And we're not going to go into his whole birth story and all of that, but when God finally, at the burning bush, at this moment when God says to him, I'm choosing you to be a leader, Moses says to God, no, please, my Lord, I've never been a man of words, either in times past or now that you have spoken to your servant. I am slow of speech and slow of tongue. In Hebrew, ani kvad pe v'kvad lashon. Literally, like my mouth is heavy, my tongue is heavy. I can't speak. Speaking is not my strong side. And God said to him, who gives human speech? Who makes them dumb or deaf, seeing or blind? Is it not I, God? Now go, and I will be with you as you speak and will instruct you. Literally, in Hebrew, it says, I will be with your mouth, and I will tell you what to speak. And more than that, he sends him his brother and his best friend, Aaron, who will also be his mouth to speak for him. But here we have another example that the people of Israel had no words, but also Moses has no words. He doesn't know how to speak. It's something that Moses throughout his life doesn't know how to speak. He hits the rock instead of speaking to it. But at the end, we have 5 books in the Torah. And the last book, the book of Deuteronomy, is a book which is Moses' speech. It's an entire book. A fifth of the Torah is Moses saying, I just have a couple of small things to say. And then he speaks, and it takes us, like a couple of months to get through all these speeches. That's Moses, who from saying, Ani kvad pe v'kvad lashon, my mouth is heavy, my tongue is heavy, he suddenly says, I know how to speak. And this is the movement we're going through. Because the people of Israel, they call out to God, they cry out to God. They don't have words for the pain that they're going through. I don't know if that sounds familiar to you, but one of the things that I hear Israelis in the past year and a half, and people everywhere saying, I don't have words for what I'm feeling. And I got to tell you that as a therapist, often my job is I sit with people who sit right here and say to me, I don't know. I don't know what I'm feeling. I don't have words for this. Does that sound familiar to any of you? Have we had moments like that in our life? That the words, how can I speak? So we're going to do another piece from the Zohar now. Okay, we're at number 5 now, if you have your pages. This is the mystery. Raza. The Zohar is saying that again. Moses is the voice, but speech and his words were in exile and were blocked. So Moses was unable to give interpretation to his words. The Zohar is teaching us here that Moses is a voice. He's a voice, but he doesn't have words. That's why Moses is saying, I can't. That's why he said, how will Paro hear me? Not because he's scared of standing instead of Paro, in front of Paro, because he says, I am just a cry. I am like the Jewish people. I don't have words for what I feel. My words are in exile, since I have no words. You know, it actually says, my words are in my exile. It's almost like the Zohar is saying, it's not in a exile. Each person has their exile that sometimes our words go to. Listen to this. It feels like poetry to me. For I am but a voice without its word, for she is in exile. And that is why the Blessed One had Aaron join and share with him. You know, one of the most important things when going through something traumatic is to have somebody, a brother, a friend, somebody to walk with you, something to be your mouth, to look at you, that you're not alone in the world, is the first step at regaining our words. Come and see, tachase. As long as speech was in exile, the voice left him, and the words were blocked and empty, without a voice. When Moses came, the voice returned. Moses was a voice without a word, so he continued until they came close to Mount Sinai. And Mount Sinai was the mountain that 40 days after Passover, after leaving Egypt, the Torah was given. And the Torah was words coming from the sky that Moses and God brought down. And at that time, the voice attached to speech, and then words were spoken, as it is written. God spoke all these words, and then Moses was complete, with his words as he should, voice and speech complete as one. Moses and the Jewish people, Moshe Rabbeinu, he said, you can't send me. I am but a voice. I have nothing but a voice. I don't have words. I don't know what the right words are. I can call out. You need somebody who can speak, who can say, I don't know how to do that. And God said, don't worry. I'm the one who will be with your mouth. Aaron will be with you. We will work through this trauma until we find the right words. And it's amazing that this is the journey of the Jewish people and Moses' journey personally to find words. There's an important book that came out a couple years ago. I don't know how many therapists we have in the room here. This book is called The Body Keeps the Score. Here I see Yana is already reaching for it. I'm sure that you have it. It's by Bessel van der Kolk. It's a wonderful book. And it's all about trauma. And the next piece is from his book. And listen to this because it's so beautiful. All trauma is pre-verbal. Shakespeare captures the state of speechless terror in Macbeth after the murdered king's body is discovered. Oh, horror, horror, horror! Tongue nor heart cannot conceive nor name thee. Confusion now is made his masterpiece. Under extreme conditions, people may scream obscenities, call for their mothers, howl in terror, or simply shut down. Victims of assaults and accidents sit mute and frozen in emergency rooms. Traumatized children lose their tongues and refuse to speak. Even years later, traumatized people often have enormous difficulty telling other people what has happened to them. Their bodies re-experience terror, rage, and helplessness, as well as the impulse to fight or flee. But these feelings are almost impossible to articulate. Trauma by nature drives us to the edge of comprehension, cutting us off from language based on common experience or an imaginable past. This doesn't mean that people can't talk about a tragedy that has befallen them. Most survivors come up with their cover story that offers some explanation for their symptoms and behavior for public consumption, the story that we tell people about what happened. But anybody who's gone through trauma and everybody who has a story, we know the gap between that story and what actually happened. These stories, however, rarely capture the inner truth of the experience. It is enormously difficult to organize one's traumatic experiences into a coherent account, a narrative with a beginning, a middle, and an end. So much of what we do in therapy is help people tell their story so it has a beginning, a middle, and an end. Even a seasoned reporter like the famed CBS correspondent Ed Murrow struggled to convey the atrocities he saw when the Nazi concentration camp Buchenwald was liberated in 1945. I pray you believe what I have said. I reported what I saw and heard, but only part of it. For most of it, I have no words. When words fail, haunting images capture the experience and return as nightmares and as flashbacks. This is what trauma does. It disconnects us from our ability to speak. In neuroimagery, the Broca part of the brain is suddenly in deep fog. All the parts that are responsible for finding the right words, they don't work. And we all know the experience of going through something hard and not being able to speak, sometimes not being able to think. Beyond calls this a taxon linking, that I lose my capacity to comprehend, to think, to understand. I speak, but I don't know what I'm speaking. I don't have the words. I can't. How do we do this? And this is what the book is about what happens when words are at loss and what other work we can do, body work, other work with memories, things to evoke and to deal with the things that scare us most. How can we work with this? How do we work with trauma that cuts? And how do we heal by starting to connect? I'll just say this, we won't learn this, but Sefer Yetzirah, the book of creation, has a teaching that every month has a fixing. That what we need to be working on. And I'll just say that the month we're in now, Adar, which is in essence actually like the Elul of the year, it's the last month, because the beginning of the year in Jewish calendars, in ancient Jewish calendars, is Nisan. So it's the last month, and it's the month of chaos. And the fixing of Adar is laughter. But the fixing of Nisan, which is the month of Passover, is speech. So we move from laughter to speech, from crying to speech. This is the movement. Reb Nachman has a whole teaching where he says, it used to be that the beginning, that we said that all the beginnings are from Passover, but the truth is, and he never ended that Torah, but his student Reb Natan says he meant that we start much earlier, because we can't start with words. We need to start with the trauma of not having words. And laughter is just that. I laugh when I don't have the right words. It's beyond me. It's beyond my comprehension. It's absurd. Or I cry, or I sigh, or all those words that we saw that are for our nonverbal communication. And now I want, since this is a class that we're doing Hassidic and Kabbalistic text, but also psychoanalytical texts as well. I want to do with you one of the earliest texts that was written by Sigmund Freud in a book that he wrote together with Breuer on studies on hysteria that was written in 1895, 5 years before he wrote his book on dreams. And in studies on hysteria, there was a famous patient. Her name was, he called her Anna O. Now we know her name was Berta Peppenheim, a young Jewish woman, I think from Austria. And she was treated because this is what Freud called hysteria. And she would lose her ability to speak German. She spoke only English for a while. She had all kinds of very difficult symptoms that a lot of them had to do with her body, with not being able to move, not being able to almost like it seemed like a neurological disease. Freud was a doctor, and he began treating this in a very different way because it didn't seem like there was anything wrong with Anna O. And they tried treating her, and this is what he describes in his earliest description. This is really, guys, the birth of psychoanalysis, treating Anna O and these studies in hysteria. So, I used to visit her in the evening when I knew I should find her in her hypnosis. And then I relieved her of the whole stock of imaginative products that she accumulated since my last visit. She had all these almost like daydreams, fantasies, things having to do with her father and with all kinds of things, but that were also difficult that would come up. It was essential that this should be effected completely if good results were to follow. When this was done, she became perfectly calm, and the next day she'd be agreeable, easy to manage, industrious, even cheerful. But on the second day, she would be increasingly moody, contrary, and unpleasant. And this would become still more marked on the third day. When it was like this, it wasn't always easy to get her to talk, even in her hypnosis. At the beginning, Freud believed that hypnosis is the best way to get somebody to connect them to their unconscious. Later on, he said that it's probably not a good idea, and that's when he spoke more about transference and countertransference. He didn't want all the defense mechanisms down, but at the beginning he used hypnosis. She aptly described this procedure, Anna O, speaking seriously, as a talking cure. Okay, because imagine this, comes a doctor, and instead of checking my throat and giving me medicine, he speaks to me. While she referred to it jokingly as chimney sweeping. These are the two names she gave it, talking cure and chimney sweeping. Why chimney sweeping? This is like, I think of Mary Poppins, so Victorian, right? But of like, to be able to come and all the images and difficulties that she couldn't speak about, they were clogging her mind. And by speaking them, it was like cleaning her chimney. She knew that after she had given utterance, speaking, to her hallucinations, she would lose all her obstinacy and what she described as her energy. And when after some comparatively long interval, she was in a bad temper, she would refuse to talk, and I was obliged to overcome her unwillingness by urging and pleading and using devices such as repeating a formula with which she was in the habit of introducing her stories. He would take her words and repeat it to her. So the words that she would say when in deep hypnosis, things having to do with her father or with childhood memories or certain things that maybe seemingly had to do with nothing, he would repeat them to her. And each couple of days he would come, and this is the beginning of Freud realizing that there's another way to work with people that doesn't have to do with medicine, but has to do with a talking cure. It's interesting because I think that this specific patient actually, for the whole while of her pathology, she spoke only in English, and it could actually be that the word she gave to it was a talking cure. But I think if we're speaking about Passover here, what two beautiful images that are so connected to what we saw in what the Zohar says, that we have, I mean, chimney sweeping. Maybe we'll speak about that in our next class, about the idea of cleaning. But there's something about cleaning which is an act, which is also symbolic. But the most important thing isn't the chimney sweeping, which is also, he says, she said that jokingly, but Freud kept on, even in 5 essays on psychoanalytic psychology that he gave in 1910, he still says talking cure and chimney sweeping, cleaning, something about the act of cleaning that allowed her to let go of some of these pathological parts that she wasn't able to function. But the more important thing is the talking cure. And here I want to jump to the earliest story, one of two, but of how the Maggid of Mezrich met the Baal Shem Tov. Now, it's not you'll see why I chose to bring these together. I want to say something about the Baal Shem Tov. We spoke a lot about the Kabbalistic, the Zohar, Rabbi Chaim Vital, Rabbi Isaac Luria. Now we're speaking about the Hassidic movement. The Hassidic movement started 250 years ago in Ukraine, and it spread to Poland. And the person who founded it was the Baal Shem Tov, the master of a good name. And the master of a good name, he was like I would say he was a folk doctor. He would give people, herbs and medicine and heal them. But he was a great master, and he brought this revolution in all of the Jewish world, where he said it's not about, rolling in the snow and fasting and it's about, the most important thing is joyous prayer. It's singing. It's about being close to God. And he has a bunch of surprising stories, the Baal Shem Tov, meaning if before him people said, if you're the wisest people are, they were called the learners, the people who know how to read, they're the ones who are on the highest level. There's a short story about the Baal Shem Tov. There was a decree, and the gates of heaven were locked. The Baal Shem Tov thought for a while, and he said, get me the 10 best thieves in Mezrich, that's in Mezhibush. They brought him 10 thieves, and he prayed together, and the gates of heavens opened. And his student says, really, thieves? Couldn't you say like the greatest righteous people, the people who give the most tzedakah, the people who are know the most Zohar, like why the thieves? And the Baal Shem Tov says, I saw that the gates of heaven were completely locked shut. I needed the best thieves to pick the locks to break open the gates of heaven. Now, it's a cute story, but it also shows that he was thinking out of the box. And he's saying that it could be that the 10 greatest thieves are able to work more spiritually than the 10 people who sit and learn Torah all day. We never know. And the Baal Shem Tov's greatest student, his name was the Maggid of Mezrich, and he became the master after him. But the Maggid of Mezrich, he started being one of these people who would fast weeks at a time and not eat a thing. And so this is the story how he met the Baal Shem Tov. I heard the tale how the great Maggid became close to the Baal Shem Tov. The Maggid would fast 7 to 8 times for a week each time. Imagine that, 2 months of fasting, not a day at a time. Now we have Ramadan starting soon where you fast a day at a time and eat each night. He would fast for a week at a time and only eat on Shabbat. And he became very sick. It's not very good for your body. Once Reb Mendel came to see him, and he was very ill. And he said to him, have you not heard there is a Baal Shem Tov in the world? Go to him, and he will heal you. But the Maggid of Mezrich, Reb Dov Ber, answered with a verse from Psalms. He shook his head and said, Tov lachasot ba'adonai mibtoach ba'adam. It's better to seek refuge in God than to put trust in man. I don't want a man to heal me. God should heal me. But finally, I don't know how, but his relative says you need to go, and they convinced him, and he finally went to Mezrich to meet the Baal Shem Tov. And when he finally arrived, he saw the Baal Shem Tov sitting at his bed, not at his desk, not in the house of study, and he was learning. And he said hello, and the Maggid asked to be healed. He said, please heal me. And the Baal Shem Tov, I imagine him lifting his eyes from his book, and he reproached him. He said very harshly, he turns to him. This is the first thing he says to him. My horses don't eat matzah. A strange thing to say. It wasn't Passover, not as far as I know. The Maggid began to sweat and felt very weak. And he went outside. He sat on the porch to rest. Something about this one sentence that the master said to him, it's almost like a Zen story. It shook him, and he didn't know what to do about it. Soon we'll speak about what this means. And then the Besht is short for Baal Shem Tov. He gathered 10 men and came out to reconcile with him. And he says, I wanted to heal him with words. Does this sound familiar? Healing with words? And I heard that the Besht would go to visit him for 2 weeks, sat by his side and read Psalms. And then the Besht said to him, I would like to cure you with words because it's an available medicine. And after some time, the Maggid, Dov Ber, began healing until he could sit at the best's table. So this is an interesting story. There are a lot of people who explained different things. What does it mean that he said to him? First of all, I thought it's like fitting that it's a Pesach, a Passover story that he says to him, right? My horses don't eat matzah. What is he saying to him? He comes to see the master. He's very sick. He fasts all day. People who fast probably because they thought that they're going to overcome their physicality. I can fast for a whole week. Some people say he fasted. You can't fast for a whole week, but all he ate was matzah. I don't know. I don't know how many of you can eat matzah, what it does to our, digestive system. It's bad enough to eat that for 2 months. That's all he ate. Like eating very simply. Matzah is the most simple food that you can. He wanted to overcome his physicality. Rabbi Nachman, the grandson of the Baal Shem Tov, he would eat without chewing. He would swallow without chewing. He didn't want to taste the food. He also got very sick. And something about this, here we have this Judaism that says be asceticism and fasting and praying, and people would buy nettle and they would put it in their clothes in order to itch their body. There was something about overcoming physicality, that it was this very powerful, but here the Baal Shem Tov comes, and this person comes, he's sick, but he's also sick because he's not taking care of his body. And he thinks, oh, I'm such a tzaddik, I don't eat for 2 months, I only eat matzah. And the Baal Shem Tov says to him, my horses eat matzah. Meaning you think you're so great, but you forgot. First of all, my horses are still horses. And also, you've forgotten your horse. The horse is a symbol of the body, of physicality. So many dreams when we have a horse. It's this part of this health of our body. You forgot your body. And he shakes, he sweats, he sits outside. But then the Baal Shem Tov sits with them and he says, I'm not leaving. After reproaching him, he brings him closer and he says, I want to heal you with words. Does that sound familiar? Couple, I'd say Baal Shem Tov, we're talking about, he died in 1760. So 100 and almost 150 years before Freud, he's saying, I'm a medicine man. I have all kinds of medicine, but one form of medicine is healing with words. And that's what I want to do with you. That's what I need to do with you. And we have to work on words. It's amazing because so much of the teachings of the Maggid of Mezrich is about words, the sustaining utterance, the power of words, how the words create the whole world. Everything is through words. There's something about that was important for him. Now, I do want to say it's unclear. Freud, even though he repeated some of the words she said, the healing cure is about hearing what she's saying. She's the one cleaning her chimneys and speaking. I'm not sure what the healing words that the Baal Shem Tov said. Is it that he sat at his bedside and said Psalms with him? Did he read Tehillim with him? Is he saying Tehillim when he's read Tehillim and said, I want to only trust in God? But at the end, he came and he sat outside and he said, help me, heal me. And he healed him by reminding him that he has a body and by speaking to him. And I want to say, we could say, and Chaviva Pdaya, who's a professor of Kabbalah, she says they're opposite because Freud had Anna speak, and the Baal Shem Tov spoke to him. But speak, and this is Martin Buber, right? It's dialogue. Dialogue is about two people speaking to each other. And when we have two people speaking to each other, something happens there. Something is created between them. They're a little bit less alone in the world. Not just the Maggid, by the way. Dov Ber became his greatest student. The Baal Shem Tov was a little bit less alone after he had the Maggid, who continued and deepened the Hassidic movement. And the amazing thing about the Maggid of Mezrich is when he died and all of his students gathered around his bed and they said, who will be master after you die? Do you know what he said? He said, all of you. and he sent Menachem Nachum of Chernobyl to go to northern Russia, and he sent Zusha to Poland, and Elimelech to Poland as well, and Chabad Rebbe, the Alter Rav, to White Russia, to Liadi, all these places, they sent them all over. This is how Hasidic movement spread, because of the Maggid. Okay. Another piece from Freud, and it's so beautiful. This is in one of the earliest things Freud writes, and he writes about the power of a doctor. And this is before he even wrote his book on dreams. This is 1890. Look how beautiful this is. It's from an article called Psychical or Mental Treatment. Words are the essential tool of mental treatment. A layman will no doubt find it hard to understand how pathological disorders of the body and mind can be eliminated by mere words. He will feel that he's being asked to believe in magic, and he will not be so very wrong. For the words which we use in our everyday speech are nothing other than watered-down magic. But we shall have to follow a roundabout path in order to explain how science sets about restoring to words a part, at least, of their former magical power. Now, too, we begin to understand the magic of words. Words are the most important media by which one man seeks to bring his influence to bear on another. Words are a good method of producing mental changes in the person to whom they are addressed, so that there is no longer anything puzzling in the assertion that the magic of words can remove the symptoms of illness, and especially such as are themselves founded on mental states. Okay. This is also from Rabbi Isaac Luria. And he has a beautiful teaching that says, what is the heart of, let's do this for a second. What is the heart of the Seder? When you read the Haggadah, we have a Haggadah and we go through it. There's a lot of ones that are short. What's the longest one?
Magid.
Magid, right? My Abba, and we had a tradition in our home that every one of the simanim, we all yell. It helps keep everybody awake. But we'd get to Magid, and everybody goes, Magid! Rachza! So Magid, it's long. And Magid literally means, it's not the Magid of Mezrich, but he was called the Magid because he was a speaker. He was an orator. And Magid is about speaking. And it's all filled with stories we tell and the questions we ask. Hang on 1 second. Okay, just plugging my computer in. So Magid is long and it's all about speaking. Okay, so the Ari, Rabbi Isaac Luria, he has a teaching that says this. Why is Pesach called Pesach? This is the meaning of the word Pesach. Pesach literally means to leap, because God passed over, Passover. But Pesach can be read as Peh, Sach. Peh means mouth, and Sach means speaks. You can hear people in Hebrew say, Mata Sach, what are you saying? It's not the same letters, but Sach like Sicha. Pesach literally means the mouth speaks. And what do we do on Passover? Our mouth speaks. It's a talking cure, which is why we must tell more and more stories about the Exodus from Egypt. And you can now understand the reason for the mitzvah to tell about our Exodus from Egypt on the Seder night. For Pesach means the mouth speaks, which are the surrounding lights that leave our mouth when we speak in dialogue. When we speak with another person, we're in dialogue and light comes out of our mouth. When we meet another person, that happens. That is why we must tell the story of Exodus, because leaving Egypt is like the chesed, the loving kindness, the outpour, the flow coming out of the throat, called the sieges. Because the throat is a tight space. Remember we said Mitzrayim is Egypt, but it's also the tight, the Mitzarim, the Matzor, the siege, since it's a place of constriction, Makomza. So on Passover, we speak and we allow our voice to formulate words and questions and a narrative and a story. And Reb Tzadok HaKohen Milublin, who's a great Hasidic master, who lived in the same time as Freud, he died in the year 1900. Hang on, here we go. Reb Tzadok HaKohen Milublin says, all who merit to experience the light of Exodus from Egypt, which is freedom of the words that awaken each and every year, as is known within the sacred time, will be able to speak words as they wish. Listen to how beautiful he says. I'll say it in Hebrew too. Everybody who zoche, who merits to taste, to experience, to achieve this light of leaving Egypt, which is speaking words that have left exile. Every year, as we sit around the table, this energy, this power, this experience is awakening that everybody can speak words. שבכל שנה באותו זמן ידוע מקדושת הזמנים יוכל להרבות דיבורים כרצונו. You can speak many words that are connected to your ratzon. Ratzon is your most inner will. ושמעתי רמז, I heard a hint, וישובו ויחנו לפני פי החירות, which is a verse right before the splitting of the sea. The people of Israel sat right in front of a place outside of Egypt. But he reads it, he says, vayashuvu, that you have to return, you have to sit. Vayachanu, you have to settle down. Kodem shiotzi piv lechirut, before the freedom of our mouth, we need to be settled. We need to sit. We need to be in a meditative practice. And then we can speak. Kechol ha'oleh al rucho, everything that comes, that flows out of our spirit, we allow ourselves to speak that. And Reb Tzadok is saying a beautiful thing, because he's saying every year, wherever you are, you might be sitting around the Seder, you might be in a pub somewhere, you might be at work, I don't know where you're going to be this Seder in a month and a half. You might be still in chaos. You might be, I don't know, in who knows where we might be. Hopefully we'll all be sitting around a table sharing with the people we love. But he says, I want you to know, and this is such a deep Hasidic teaching, wherever you are, time, sacred time, has something that affects us. And there's something in the time of the spring, of the flowers blossoming, of nature leaving its constraints of Egypt, of the cold, of becoming free, which enables us as well to thaw out some of the trauma and allow ourselves to find the right words for what it was we went through. And the time to do that is Passover. And the whole process leading us through cleaning our house and baking the matzah and burning the chametz and sitting around the table and asking ma nishtana and telling the story and having a cup for Elijah the prophet and telling stories of Miriam. All this is meant for us to sit around the table and to speak words. And not just to speak it to ourselves, to speak it to the people around us, to be in dialogue, to speak to our elders, to speak to our children, to speak to our inner child, to speak to our inner elder, to be in dialogue and to be free, to allow our words to leave the shackles. Like the Zohar we learned, sometimes we're just a voice. We just want to scream, like we sign van der Kolk's book. But there are moments that we need to take that scream. We don't want to lose the heart, the pain, the grief. That what God heard at the end was our pain. but we want to be able to speak words, and that the soul of the words will still have a voice. We don't want to lose our voice. So we speak about people not having a voice. We want women to have a voice. We want men to have a voice. We want children to have a voice. They used to tell kids, right? Kids should be seen and not heard. No, children have a voice. We need to hear them. And on Passover, we hear them. This is part of what will be learning in the next couple of weeks. We want to have a voice, and we need to find the right words. And when they connect together, like Moses, suddenly something beautiful, the plenty, the Torah is given. It's like heaven opens up, and the words that are filled with the spirit, with the soul, with the voice. We have voice and words as one. And this is the movement we're trying to move through. And I think that today, with the Bibas family being buried, seeing the father stand there and eulogize his family and saying, how do you find words for this? How can we? And where tens of thousands of Israelis stood just on the way, just to say, you're not alone, we're with you. We're with you. And even if you don't have words, we're with you. We stand with you. And still people who are still in there, who are still not free. Freedom isn't just an idea. There are people who aren't free. And we're trying to learn, hopefully this year, hopefully every year, as the time enables us to connect the voice of what it is we feel together with our words. So that's the end of our class for today. And I'm opening it up if anybody has something that they want to ask or share or say something before we move on to doing a little bit of an exercise as well. Okay, so I've allowed people to unmute themselves, if anybody would like. Okay. We don't have that much time left, but we'll take 10 minutes now. And I would like to invite everybody, and it could be if you have a computer or just a notebook or a piece of paper. And if you don't have that, we can just also close your eyes and think. But I want to invite everybody to think about a time in your life that you had no words or struggled to find them. A time in your life that was hard. And that you didn't have words. What did it feel like? What does it feel like remembering it? I'm inviting you to do a short writing exercise, looking back at that time. Why do you think you had no words? And maybe the hardest part, what words would you give to it now? And sometimes trauma or pain stays wordless. Sometimes we spend our whole life looking for a word. Sometimes you can look back and find a word. What was it like? What does it feel like? Perhaps you were children. Or later on in your life. What did it feel like? Where in your body did you feel it? What does it feel like not having words? And I want to invite you. I don't know if this is possible to do. I'm trying to, but to share a word. And if you can, to even change the name in that little square on Zoom and write a word. Could be a word or two word, something that comes up. Is there a word or a phrase? It's not easy going back to these times in our life. Memory touches a place where the pain can still be raw as if it happened yesterday and as if it's still happening. Part of our psyche turns away from touching all of those points of trauma within us. But in Passover, we face all the parts that normally we don't want. We search in the cracks with a candle, with consciousness, adding light to all of our shadow sides, to see, to recognize, to face. And sometimes we could be flooded with pain and with difficulty. And sometimes a word will emerge. And sometimes the words will emerge without noticing. You might be writing and just keep on writing. Automatic writing is a way of letting our unconscious speak the parts in us that we don't always let them through. So you could rename yourselves on Zoom if you want to share a word, and that way you don't have to see on the chat. You can just write it here. And Susan says, I'm a visual artist. Sometimes when I have no words, making art is the healing. Panic or fear. So lost. God was holding my hand, walking beside me. Loving speech, deep listening is truly healing. Pain, powerless, while looking back, more clarity and understanding the possible purpose. Tongue-tied, like Moses, kvad peh v'kvad lashon, essential pain. Yeah, there's some things that can't be renamed. Convulsive. Sometimes these words are a message from ourselves to ourselves, at moments that all we need is a little bit of clarity. And Passover is one of the journeys from the voice that cries out to the words that we need to hear and to share. And like the Maggid of Mezrich, who had the Baal Shem Tov speak to him and heal him through words, and like Freud, who found this way to use words as a cure, as a talking cure. I'm inviting all of us in this journey that through the text we read to be able to start healing some of our trauma. In the next couple of classes, each class will have a focus. One will be with things in the psychoanalytic world of facing our fear and in telling stories as a narrative therapy and in asking questions like in the Manishtana, and how questions are an important part of the inquiry in psychoanalytic work as well. And we will speak about being an elder and being a child. And we'll end with the splitting of the sea. And being free is the ability to change, to move from one state to another. Thank you for joining us for tonight. I will send this out to everybody, and I'm really happy to see a bunch of you here, and seeing your familiar faces fills my heart with joy. And I hope that you will continue and that we will meet next week as well. Goodbye to everybody, and good night. Thank you. Shuni, shalom. Hello, Julian. Hello, Hannah. Hello, hello. Hello, Yana.